Traveling the Vortex.
We've joined the Doctor as he travels the Vortex and arrive at episode number 487, at the heart of the battle, where the blood of the innocents flow and only the monstrous survive. I'm Keith.
I'm Sean.
I'm Glenn. How are you guys doing
How
today?
are you monstrous fellas?
Pretty good. How about you?
Monstrous.
Pretty good.
Did you guys do anything fun this week?
Not really. We got together with the grandkids, saw them for the first time in months, I think. So that was fun.
That's fun. Did you guys watch anything? Has anybody watched the Snyder Cut?
Nope.
You did watch it, Keith?
I did not.
You did not.
Sean did.
Sean did. Okay. What'd you think?
A spoiler-free take. I enjoyed it. I think it is much better and much stronger than the theatrical cut. And in many ways, quite to my surprise. I tried to go into it with an open mind, but I am not the largest fan of Snyder's Superman movies. But this was a very strong kind of end to the trilogy, as it were. It's still too long. It still has problems. But yeah, I was quite impressed.
I'm in the same boat. I went into it kind of with low expectations and expecting not to like it, since I too am not a fan of Snyder's Superman films. But I was the same way. I think it's entirely too long. I think it was an effort to put everything in that was shot, but and very unnecessary. But
well, if you cut out some of the slow-mo, you could knock an hour off.
Yeah, that's true. There are some choices that I thought were probably not necessarily as necessary, as far as, well, one particular would be a certain particular suit. There's no reason for it. There's a reason for it in the comics. They don't give us a reason for it in this one. So that was just fan service is really all it was. But overall, I was the same. It did take me 3 sittings to get through it. And I think part of that's because I think the first third to maybe half of the movie is really slow. There's way too much set up. It does explore the characters very well, and it gives you a lot more, I think, of character building than the theatrical cut did, the Whedon cut. But it's still way too long. They go way into too much stuff. But the last half of the movie is just really good and kept me captivated all the way to the end. So I was impressed as well. I thought Snyder did a good job. But I think if somebody could have railed him in a little bit on the time and some of the things that should have been cut, they should have done that. But for what it is, it's what it is.
I'll say what's really interesting about it is, for not being a fan, we did go back and we rewatched Man of Steel, which I still have colossal problems with. And then we watched Bat Soup, which originally I loathed. I really was not a fan of it, even though it retroactively made Man of Steel better. I will say that on this watch, and of course we did the extended cut, but on this watch, I did enjoy it more. I still don't know that I liked it. It still has colossal problems in that second chapter. But I began to see a little bit more of what I think Snyder was going for with the kind of epic mythology of the DC characters. And that's something that Justice League really kind of brought to the forefront to play with. Mm-hmm. And another friend kind of described it that, the Marvel movies are comic books and the DC movies are graphic novels. And I think there's a certain amount of truth to that. Yeah. The DC is really trying for that kind of prestige format, and Snyder did it. I mean, he really, very overindulgent, but not necessarily.
That's a good word. Overindulgent. It was very overindulgent.
Having not seen it, it also seems to me that the fans clamoring for the Snyder Cut didn't actually get the Snyder Cut, because there is no way this 4-hour movie would have gone to theaters.
No. This is, in fact, I think it's aptly named Zack Snyder's Justice League. I'm glad that they've kind of dropped that whole Snyder Cut idea, because you're absolutely right. There are a lot of things in this although there's a certain cameo that I was assured was part of it was shot later and added to, but part of it, the part that I thought was added in. I'm trying to be very spoiler free here, but the part that I thought was added in, I found out later was not. It was intended to be in the original version. So I was a bit surprised by that. There were a couple of other things that I was surprised were original things, but I agree with Keith. I think there is very much a lot of things that were not originally part of the vision. So,
yeah, I think I read somewhere that Snyder had kind of an original, his first edit, his work print edit, that he showed to the DC executives clocked in at just over 4 hours. And when the whole Snyder Cut business really got the momentum behind it and people were clamoring for this 4-hour edit, he kept trying to back them off of that, saying, guys, that wasn't really the movie. I mean, there were no visual effects in it. There was no this. It was just kind of this is what we've got so far. We're still assembling it. And then I think once everything kind of mounted and fandom started really getting behind it, I think he kind of just decided to swing for the fences and go for broke.
Yeah, I think you're right. Cool. Did you guys watch anything else?
First episode of Falcon and Winter Soldier was good.
Yeah, I quite enjoyed that as well. Sean, you haven't
Kind of
seen it,
a
right?
nice-
That'll be tomorrow night?
That'll be tomorrow night, yep. Once again, we were about 4 days behind.
Well, you don't have to worry about that for like 6 weeks because since it's a shorter run.
Yeah, it's only 6 episodes. Yeah, it was a good setup to the series. I think it's it hits the right beats, hits the right tone, and I think it was a very intriguing first episode. And it really
I definitely want more.
It feels very much like an MCU movie, very much from just even the first 45 minutes we've gotten. So
yeah, I thought it had a very much a Captain America Winter Soldier feel to it.
I would
which
agree.
is one of my favorite, so I'm all okay with that.
Yeah,
Nice slow burn at the beginning. I appreciated.
I don't think I watched anything else. Well, we watched Iron Man because we're still on our chronological watch through, so everybody is stuck with it. I'm afraid. Well, I guess Iron Man 2 is next, but I'm afraid when we do Incredible Hulk, I'm gonna lose a couple of them, but that's all right. Although Holly's pretty sure she hadn't seen it, so
We've only got a couple more episodes left of Staged Season 2, which I don't know if I've enjoyed quite as much as Season 1. It's almost become it's become more meta and then somehow a bit more serious. I don't know. The humor is not quite landing with me as much as it did the first season.
it's funny you say that because the reviews that I've seen have pretty much echoed what you're saying, that it felt like it was a little too, it's taking itself a little too serious, so the humor doesn't land quite the way the first season did, is what I read.
Yeah, and like the episode we watched tonight, David Tennant and Michael Sheen weren't really in it together. They were in it, but they were on their own doing their own things. So part of the charm of the show was them interacting with each other. But and it was more this episode where it felt like, well, okay, they're kind of really taking a bit more of a serious approach to part of it. And season 1 had some very heartfelt moments in it. So it's not like the show has never been serious.
Right.
It's just, I don't know, part of it feels like, they did a season 1 and it was so great. And then they took a step back and did a meta continuation. And the meta part almost doesn't work.
Sean, do you watch anything else?
Better review later.
We watched Fiddler on the Roof, which actually was my first time sitting all the way through it.
Really?
It's one that I've caught bits and pieces of, but usually the songs, but never all in one sitting. It's an enjoyable movie.
Cool. All right. Well, no news this week, so shall we move on to our review of the first Big Finish War Doctor box set?
The first story, The Innocents.
Big Finish. We love stories. The War Doctor.
What's your name? Who are you? Yes. It's all right. It's all right. You can tell me. Who are you?
No one. Always remember, in your hearts, the Doctor!
I fear the universe is a far more dangerous place without you.
I'm afraid I'm dead. Didn't you know? If you want to give me anything, make it peace and quiet. Where are you?
Hypocrites. The lot of you.
Coordinates unknown!
Then, this is it.
Doctor.
Don't call me that!
Lock all weapons on target.
You think I'm not a monster? Well, look at me now.
Prepare for total extermination of the Time Lords.
Look at me. See, I'm a monster now, aren't I? Doctor. Nobody of that name here.
Where are you going?
I told you, the TARDIS. Now, go.
No, I'm coming with you.
Don't be an idiot.
I know the Daleks. I know them.
The war has finally found me again.
You're not a monster. Monster.
Only the Monstrous. The War Doctor, Volume 1.
Bum, bum, bum.
Here.
Yeah. And that's just episode 1.
Yeah, right.
That was an involved breakdown.
What's great about this first story is it's a step back. It's the Doctor recuperating and recovering and just kind of dealing with the aftermath of him stopping the what was it? The time disruptor. And it's kind of a low key, low pace, not a whole lot happens to story, but it's so good because partially the War Doctor himself, the portrayal is just, it's a great continuation of what we saw on television. And then the other part of it is Rejoice is such a great character. The two of them together have such good chemistry that even though not a whole lot happens in it, it's, I'm just waiting for more and more and more because it's so good.
Yeah.
I think that hits the nail on the head. For me, it's not a bad setup. As you said, Keith, nothing really happens. But it's kind of an intriguing little premise to be thrown into, the Time War without really having a war. It's, the Doctor's kind of off convalescing. And it's like, oh, okay. But the story hinges on the companion and or in this case the audition of a companion, and Rejoice is such an interesting character and really just such a joy to listen to. She's just kind of got this this fascinating hook right off the bat, and then of course it's John Hurt. I mean, I imagine his back hurt a little bit from carrying this because he does. And it I'm sure it's effortless because he's just such an absolute joy. I mean, there's a little bit of a thrill there just because, it's John Hurt. But more War Doctor, more of that we, more of that we don't have a lot of. So we're going to, really dive into and just hang on his every word. And man, I did. Just talk to me, John. Just go for it.
Yeah, I think I 100% agree. I think that I don't know. I hate to say that he was carrying anything because I think all of the performances in this are standout performances. Everybody in there serves a purpose. Everyone really has something to lend to the story. And I just think that all around, I think that John Hurt stands out for certain. And I agree with you. I just was hinging on every word that came out of his mouth. And this is my second time around on these audios. So, the time disruptor, and I did not get this destructor. I didn't get this last time, but this was the same one that the Daleks had in Daleks Master Plan, right? Or the same kind of device they had in Daleks Master Plan, right? Because he made he made the comment about their previous plan on Kimball, and that's where they were developing that weapon. So they were needing the what was it, uranium they needed for it from Mavic Chen. So I thought that was a neat callback, and then of course I'll get ahead of myself just a little bit, but there's another I think cool callback and tie-in to or nod to classic Daleks stories as well coming up later.
What do you guys think of the new theme that they wrote just for the War Doctor?
I like it. When I sat down and started listening to it this time around, I listened to it and I thought, oh gosh, they reused the Eighth Doctor's early theme. And then I got to thinking about it and I was like, wait a minute, is this familiar to me because I listened to these before and I'm misremembering? And so I did. I had to go look and I realized, oh yeah, I had just I was familiar with this from the first time I'd listened to it, but I had completely thought they had reused the Eighth Doctor's earlier one before they had gotten rights to something else for him. So, but that being said, to answer your question, yes, I think it is so well suited for this Doctor. It is so well suited for the mood that these stories have and the character of the Doctor. And I really, really enjoy it.
I also felt like,
go ahead.
I also felt like maybe it was a reuse of the Eighth Doctor's theme, which was a little disappointing initially. And yet it fits the War Doctor so much better than it ever would have fit the Eighth Doctor. So, I come down on being okay with it.
The first time I heard it, it took me a while to realize that it was actually the Doctor Who theme because I thought it was varied enough. And it's not until it gets to like halfway through that I'm like, oh, there it is. Okay. So I thought that's what helped make it feel more like the War Doctor because he's not trying to be the Doctor. So the theme is also trying not to be the theme while being the theme at the same time.
It's definitely an interesting take on it in some regards.
I thought the effect of the Time Destructor was really cool too. I mean, because in visual, it's easy to do it because you just show, the Doctor aging, the Daleks aging, Sarah Kingdom aging. But in this, in order to do it in audio, you kind of wonder, how do you pull that off? And I think they do a really good job by doing that distortion of the audio and drawing it to a complete stop. I thought that was kind of a clever effect to give kind of the impression of it, happening at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Funny, Glenn, that you went with the Daleks Master Plan Time Destructor, because when I listened to it, the first thought that I had was that it was a callback to the pinball machine.
Huh?
Because that is the Daleks in the Doctor Who pinball game are trying to get the Time Destructor, and the pinball machine talks to you. And so when I heard it, that was where I went with it, thinking, oh, what a cool callback. Completely dismissing the fact that, no, it's actually canon, and it's actually in an episode.
No, I hadn't even...
I was going to say, don't you think the pinball is calling back to Dalek's Master Plan?
Yeah, I think
I'm
so.
Sure it probably is. But
yeah, I hadn't even thought about that. I didn't remember that it was the Time Disruptor. I knew it was the Time something that they were saying, but I don't think I never realized that they were saying Time Destructor. So, I'll be darned.
Just where my brain went, I got all giddy. Oh, that's so cool. Oh, no, it's not what you think. I should know better at this point. It's never what I think.
You're right.
60 years of Doctor Who. I'm sure they got that reference from somewhere. It's not where I think they got it from.
Well, to be fair, your first introduction to the Time Disruptor would have been, or Destructor would have been, the pinball game, because you only recently watched Dalek's Master Plan within the last couple of years. So
yeah, that's when he did it. That was my first go around.
Right. So that it's perfectly understandable why that's where you landed first. So neat. All right. Well, shall we move on to the next story, which is
The Thousand Worlds.
Bum, bum, bum.
They're all going to be bum, 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 aren't they, Sean?
They're all going to be bum, bum, bum. Spoilers.
This one I really feels like the meat of the story, and I mean, obviously, this one and the next one are much more tied together than the first one is. Other than we are reintroduced to Rejoice many years later, the girl from the first story, and so I think there's a lot more going on here in this story, which I think is actually better than The Innocents. The Innocents is very, very good as a setup story, as a let's refamiliarize ourselves with the War Doctor. He's put in a situation where he has to help, another society. It has to be very doctor-like, and he is still even working against or fighting against that. But this one almost more puts him in his element of being the War Doctor, and the effect of him battling Daleks as well. So I think that this one I thought was better in the fact that it really felt more like a War Doctor story. And on top of that, you've got, William Hurt, who's just doing a phenomenal job. I love, although she's not in it much, Cardinal Illustra, which we'll get more of her as we move along with these two. But I really, really enjoy her, which we got a little taste of her in the first story as well. I like Veclin a lot. I think she's a great character. Saratrix was an interesting character. I thought the setup for this was neat. I thought that I think it's the cliffhanger of this one where we find out that Saratrix is actually there to try to make peace with the Daleks, and it's at that point that I thought, okay, what an interesting concept. Unfortunately, later I think something happens that kind of soured me on the storyline for him. But so that was pretty cool. And then to introduce the Talians? Talians? What were they called? Talians. Kind of maybe maybe an unnecessary element in the long run, because, well, I'm too afraid that I'm going to get far ahead of ourselves. So that's where I landed on this one. I really thought it was an enjoyable story and a good setup for the big finale.
What's cool about this story is they laid a bunch of groundwork that you didn't realize in the first one, like the history of Casca and how these people are here and the planetary defenses, and then you start getting those ideas paid off and explored now that we have a time jump into the future and see how they're all going to tie in together with the Time War. I thought that was all a good way to tie the two together. And yeah, this is the kind of the big action build up in this story. There's a lot of the intrigue and the running around in sewer pipes and, trying to figure out how to get to this guy before, a big reveal or a big twist coming. So it's like I don't want to go as far as saying the meat, because while there's a lot of plot, there's still a lot to carry over into the next story.
Oh yeah, because this one, while it pulls some layers away and gives us an idea of what's happening here and builds the story up, it is the next one that does a lot of the unveiling of what's happening.
This one in many ways surprised me, because when we come back, anytime we come back to a situation, it's I go into it with much trepidation, because especially when there's a time jump. Normally I am all about, oh cool, we're going to go and see what this happened. But when there's a time jump, it automatically falls into Chronicles of Narnia land for me, where I think the unforgivable sin of the second book is, well, it's 1,000 years later. Well, who cares? you don't know any of these people. There's no, there's almost no continuity between the first and the second. And if I were to, pick something out of Doctor Who that we've done relatively recently, what was the Exilius, Exilium, that one. I can't think of the name of it, but the one that
I know which one you're talking about.
You know the one I'm talking about with your guy from Buffy.
Anthony Head.
Anthony Head. And it just, we keep going back to this planet, but there's hundreds of years in between stories, and they're only kind of sort of very loosely tied together. And it's just like, eh. So when they announced Time Jump, I was like, oh boy, here we go. But then, as Keith said, all of the stuff in the first, well, most of it in the first story is set up that begins to pay off here, and it's done exceptionally well. The structure of this thing is really beautiful with how it just pulls from it, and as Glenn said, it peels back a layer, it gives you a little bit, and pulls back a little bit more, and it gives you a little bit. There's a big adventure story in there. It's very, in some ways, reminiscent for me from Genesis of the Daleks, where we're kind of going through sewers, and I was expecting a giant clam maybe, but so just there was a lot of that kind of atmosphere to it. It was really cool, and just a banger story. And once again, hey, there's John Hurt. Talk to me, John. And he just, I don't mean to say carrying it in a bad connotation as though that nobody else did anything. It's just that he makes this so easy to listen to. Because his performance, and even with the darkness that starts to tinge in with some of the events, and his kind of ruleful nature of, he considers himself responsible for starting the actions, but yet he's still so flippant and funny, and he's still the Doctor, whether he wants to admit it or not, whether he wants to claim it or not, and that just fills me with this absolute joy that some of my favorite Doctors give me. And I just get that from droves from John Hurt. It's so great.
Yeah.
I think part of why, there's that connections that we see in all of these stories, and I think the smartest thing they could have done is the fact that they had one writer for all three. So it's really one big 3-part story as opposed to 3 individual stories.
Yeah.
So having Nick Briggs write the entire thing, I think, was a smart move.
Agreed. It kind of keeps everything kind of concise. It keeps all of the points that it tries to make and all the dots that it connects stay, very finely tuned. And I would agree. I think that was its that was one of its strengths. Yeah.
Excellus. That was the one. Excellus Decays, Excellus Rising.
Yeah.
Excellus, that one. Not a fan of that one. Anyway.
Cool. Well, let's move on to the last one.
The Heart of the Battle.
Bum, bum, bum.
There it was.
This was my favorite with some reservations. And I think it's my favorite because it's very much in... I love when the War Doctor is in this particular situation, is put a little bit off on his back footing. He's come across Seratrix, and he's Seratrix. He's almost appalled at what Seratrix, is trying to do here, and he doesn't quite understand. And he's so very overt with his, "Are you kidding?" It's just, and he sells it so well. And I think that's it's that I really enjoy of John Hurt almost being the smartest man in the room. Like, I can't believe you guys are doing this. I can't believe that this is, you think this is going to work, that you're going to be able to broker peace with the Daleks, but at the same time playing along because he knows it's going to further him. And then making that deal with him saying, okay, if I'll go along with this, but if I can show you that they ultimately have no reason to broker peace, or they have another plan, will you, relent? And he agrees. And of course, you know where this is going to go. You know the doctor's going to discover it. You just don't know how yet. And so finding out how and why, I think, is...
Or what their plan is.
Right. And that is why I think that the layers really start getting pulled back here. I think one of my biggest problems with this is he lets... And maybe it's because it's the War Doctor and he does make these difficult choices, but when he makes the difficult choices that put people in danger or puts them in harm's way or puts them in a situation where, death is inevitable, he thinks about it, he rationalizes it, he tries to come up with a way to maybe try to do it differently, but ultimately takes that choice that he's taken as the War Doctor. But I really felt like my only nitpick with this was I felt that he sent Ceratrix to his death too easily, and then didn't have much remorse over it by saying, well, he had already signed his death knell. Well, I agree, but I sort of expect any incarnation of the Doctor to feel, have at least that moment of remorse, or that moment of, was that the right thing? Could I have done something more to save him? He was a little too flippant for me on when what's her name? The Velkin said, he died. Or no, I think it was Rejoice that was talking about him going to his death. Anyway, one of them bringing that up. So that was one of my only nitpicks about it. That and the fact that it's got the Return of the King false endings 2 or 3 times. Not as bad, but there's a lot of times that I thought, oh, okay, this is over. The Daleks have been dispatched. Oh, wait, then we've got this other group. I can't remember. I never can remember what their name is. But
the Talians.
Yeah, we got the Talians, and there's this. Okay, we've taken care of that. Oh, now wait. Now we've got Alestra stepping in to do her thing. It's just, so it was one thing after another, which I thought I was fine with, but I kept thinking, all right, this thing really just needs to get over with.
I can kind of see what you're saying about the characterization for the War Doctor, but if it were any other incarnation of the War Doctor, or any the Doctor, it would bother me more than it does here.
Yeah.
But also because, the Doctor, this incarnation won't even consider the idea of peace with Daleks.
Right.
Every other incarnation would initially. They'd go, well, really, is this even possible? But hold reservation behind. He just flat out denies it's even possible. So that, coupled with the, not being as remorseful about Ceratrix's death, I think ties more into the fact that it's the War Doctor incarnation than anything else.
I struggle with that as well, because while I agree, I think in any version of the Doctor, at his heart, wants to believe that maybe it's possible. And we've had a couple of stories come down the pipeline that, the Daleks are actually the good guys in this story. And as listeners, we're all going, yeah, right. Sure they are. We don't believe. And the Doctor questions it, and we're like, yeah, good on you, Doc, because we know. We're just waiting for the other shoe to drop. Don't trust him. And every great blue moon, they do manage to pull the rug out from under us on that. Usually it's not. There it is. But every now and then we get that moment that's, they actually were not responsible for this. Oh, okay. And so when the Doctor is so blindly, they're the bad guys, it feels a little bit against type, but it also feels like, well, he's very, very, very justified because, well, unfortunately, history's on his side. I mean,
well, look how long this incarnation has been fighting Daleks.
Yeah. And especially for this incarnation because of the Time War and how everything's been set up. I mean, they are the driving force of his entire, run, as it were. You get some Doctors that are marked by their villains. The second Doctor certainly was, the Cybermen and the Yeti. I think were kind of his 2 big ones. Mm-hmm. But the War Doctor, it's Daleks. there's no doubt there. So yeah, it was both like, maybe there's no. You're right not to trust him. I don't have to be mean about it. And with the flippant nature of the guy, again, I agree with Glenn. I think, well, shouldn't he have It was a quick to dismiss death sentence.
Yeah.
Was it a justified quick to dismiss death sentence? Maybe. I struggle with that one too.
Yeah.
Fortunately, Cardinal Alestra's there to pick up the slack and redirect all of my Veritol toward. She is such a wonderfully, I can't necessarily say evil, but ruthless.
Yeah, ruthless, conniving.
And in many ways, perfect Time Lord bureaucrat. Because when the reveals come, and that this is all the setup for this, it's like, that just is totally something you guys would do. And none of this mattered. None of the deaths, none of the, oh yes, it was very regrettable, blah, blah, blah. Back to, I got my goal.
Yeah.
Just, oh, and Jacqueline Pierce, who of course we, know as, what was her name? Cassini. Mm-hmm. From the two doctors. Wonderful to have her back in the fold, as it were. Just a fantastic performance. Mm-hmm. So she was a lot of fun, and she very quickly, I'm not mad at the War Doctor anymore because I have you to deal with.
I think also what I like is she's one of the characters. She's one of those kind of ruthless. She's not really the antagonist, but she's one of those kind of slimy people that you love to hate or you hate to love. She continues to be that very much through the remainder of this series of stories too, and she's a lot of fun. That's one of the characters I wish we could get a lot more of in the future. Unfortunately, I think Jacqueline Pierce. You just said her name. I think she just...
Yeah, Jacqueline Pierce.
Okay,
Jacqueline
She just passed away last year, 2 years ago, I think it was.
Yeah,
just
2018,
recently.
I think.
Yeah, okay. So, unfortunately, we won't get any more. Keith, I was going to ask you, because you and I reviewed Engines of War one time when Sean was away. And did you get the idea that this might be placed after Engines of War? And the reason I say that is because he makes the comment about how he doesn't travel with companions anymore. And I suppose Cinder's kind of a fluke in a way, and he's not traveling with companions, since Ace and Hex and whoever else the seventh he traveled with as the seventh Doctor, I suppose, Grace and the eighth Doctor too, I guess, Lucy and those. So, but I wondered if that was a hint that this was on the heels of Engines of War rather than Engines of War happening after this.
Yeah, I couldn't quite tell. I always kind of got the impression that Engines of War really led up to the Day of the Doctor.
I guess it does. Yeah, I guess you're right. It does.
It's not clear.
No, I think you're right. Now that you say that, I remember the elements at the end of that particular story were at least implied. It was very near to the fall of Arcadia.
Not that it helps clear it up at all, but TARDIS Wiki has that exact comment. The Doctor says he no longer travels with companions and credits Pro's Engines of War.
Oh, okay.
So they treat it as a reference to that.
Huh. All right. Well, maybe it is. I don't know. Let me check one other thing here.
But there's also a mention of the sky trenches. Who was it? Bennis? Was that his name?
Yeah.
He also talked about the sky trenches, which I suppose depending upon how long the Battle of Gallifrey actually lasted. Well, but no, if the Daleks were on Gallifrey, the Doctor wouldn't be here. He'd be on Gallifrey. So
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at my favorite site, The Complete Adventure. And they
and let us know what they say.
He actually has, Engine of War being the very last thing in the before Day of the Doctor, and he does have all of these War Doctor stories ahead of that. So that's his impression too, I guess. I don't know.
That works for me.
I just wondered.
Yeah, it works for me too.
That's the one I go by, so that's my headcanon now.
going back to the characterization, part of me wishes they had scaled back some of the doctorness to him more. The first time I listened to it, I remember being a little disappointed that he was so doctor-y, because, you know, the whole idea of the War Doctor is that he is nothing like the Doctor. But here he is through some of this story being very doctor-y, especially in the first part, and then kind of more so in the second part, and then less so in the third part, with, you know, him railing against you can't have peace with Daleks, and then being kind of flippant with the death of Seratrix, and, you know, but it is still him, you know, helping out where he can, where it felt like the idea of the War Doctor was supposed to be more of he goes in and is a warrior and kind of lays waste to situations.
Well, and
so
I think
part of me was disappointed, but another part of me enjoyed it so much that I didn't care.
Well, I think that I justify that in the sense that he, in name and deed, is trying to get away from being the Doctor, or at least being like the Doctor, like as he is in the past. But I think even because of the nature of the Doctor, I always assumed it would be very difficult for him to separate himself entirely from it. So I thought the first time I listened to this, I was sort of the same way. I felt like, oh, there's still a lot of shades of the Doctor in this, and I wasn't disappointed by it, but I was quite surprised, or taken by surprise by that. But this time, going back through and listening again, to me, this time he felt very much less Doctor-like, and maybe it was in those parts where you were talking about the first and the third story particularly, he felt very anti-Doctor, but I think I was okay with that, because again, I think even the War Doctor could not have severed himself entirely from his true nature, his true being, and put all of that behind him, or put all of that aside as he became the warrior. I think that he would have still had that struggle, that internal struggle. So I think that these land that very well. Now, not to shorthand, but later on, the next series of these is when I sort of felt like he was being a little too doctory, but we'll get there. We'll get there.
With these, I think, had we gotten a different read on the War Doctor in the 50th anniversary, I could totally agree with you, because I think our expectations with Night of the Doctor were set such that, because there was so much mystique and so much buildup about the Time War and what it did to the Ninth Doctor, that when we suddenly get this little tiny piece, and it's John Hurt, oh man. So, we have all these preconceived notions of what the Doctor's going to be like. And I still remember that, one of the first things I said about the 50th was that I didn't expect to like the War Doctor.
Mm-hmm.
I really was shocked that he's still the Doctor. Even if he doesn't want to refer to himself as that, it's still him. And so if we'd gotten a different take on him, and he was the almost villainous, monstrous guy that we kind of, I think, were built up to expect, then I would agree with you. But since he's the Doctor and he's railing against his nature in some regards, I think it's in some ways it's like the third Doctor, and maybe even the 12th, that he's putting on airs of being this very grumpy individual, but he's just not. He doesn't matter how hard he tries, he's not going to get there.
I think what sets.
I think part of me also thought of, the Day of the Doctor as him rediscovering who he really is by encountering his future incarnations. So that's a part of another reason why I thought we would have a bit more undoctor-like War Doctor, is because the end of his arc is him rediscovering himself in order to become the Night Doctor again.
Yeah, I would agree, but I think that if you take too much of the Doctor out of a Doctor Who story, you completely change. I think it changes the story so much that you can't enjoy it as a Doctor Who story. And I think that there's a fine line that they're straddling here. And I think that part of the reason we were built up so well to think that the Doctor was, a warmonger and very, warrior-like, and we had probably maybe a misconception of the Doctor, is it is very well set up in the name of the Doctor with the 11th Doctor's disdain for him, just in the way he reacts when he's, when Clara encounters him at the end where he turns around. I think that's what set us up to, well, if the 11th Doctor just, we don't talk about this, you kind of think, ooh, wow, what happened in that incarnation? So I think the setup for that was well done, and maybe took us down a different avenue than maybe it was intended.
Yeah, that's true.
And credit Matt Smith with that for selling it.
Yeah, agreed.
But yeah, the 50th really, and I guess that's another aspect of the 50th that it's such a beautifully written tale, is that not only does the War Doctor kind of rediscovering how to be the Doctor again through his other incarnations are maybe rediscovering that it's okay to forgive yourself.
Yeah, well, certainly, I think
through him.
Yeah.
I think that was certainly the message. I think it was a two-way street. Yeah.
Yeah. But it all comes down to the magic of John Hurt.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
It's too bad that it was so short-lived with being able to do these series, but I'm glad we got what we got. So, and we've got some more John Hurt, so we can revel in the fact that we've got two more series.
Three
more series.
4 total.
Cool. All right. Anything else on this set?
I did enjoy the
auspicious start.
I enjoyed the audacity of the Daleks' plan. I know they've kind of tried this before, but hurtling planets at Gallifrey to destroy it.
Right. Well, I think that the simple revelation early on in this, before we're led on to that, the fact that they're drilling to the core of the planet once again in order to install engines to move the planet, I thought, okay, this is another really cool callback to that would have been Dalek Invasion Earth, another cool callback to something else in very classic Doctor Who, that I kind of did that little squee moment.
And a bit future callback, and as far as timeline goes,
Journey's
I don't know. Yeah.
In some ways, it's almost you kind of can't help but wonder: were they maybe hoping to make it look like an accident?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, what? Gallifrey got wiped out by a rogue planet? That's a damn shame.
Not just
1,000 rogue planets.
1,000 rogue planets. It's not that they were going to throw a single planet at them.
No.
The fact that they were going to throw 1,000 planets.
Right.
The space being what it is, you increase your odds of actually hitting something.
All right. Well, Sean, what do we got coming up on the schedule?
Coming up on the schedule next week, we return to the world of Titan Comics with the 13th Doctor. We are going to do issues 5 through 8, or if you were a graphic novel person, that would be volume 2 of her adventures, and then also the 8th Doctor Adventures, season 4, number 2, Situation Vacant. So touching base with all of our favorites, as well as some of these new things. Beyond that is a discussion of the base Under Siege story. Not any one specific, but just the trope of bases and being under siege, and a reminder that you can submit some feedback and let us know your thoughts on the whole idea of being in a base under siege. That would be a cool escape room. Ooh.
Aren't most of them in a way base under siege?
Well, yeah, I guess kind of. Well, you've done more than I have, so you would know. But I suddenly,
not all of them, but
have an inkling.
Yeah, not all of them, but I think there are a few that kind of take that shadows of that model anyway.
A plan is forming. And then following that up with a return to Candy Jar and Lethbridge Stewart, The Laughing Gnome, Havoc Files 5. That is all on the docket. Things to come. Cool.
Well, be sure to check out the website, travelingthevortex.com, for updates. And if you get any value out of this podcast, why not consider putting some value back into it? You can do that by clicking on that patron link and becoming a patron supporter. And also, please consider giving us a 5-star review wherever you subscribe to podcasts, and make sure you join in the conversation on our listeners forum on Facebook. And I also did want to throw a mention out that we do have a Goodreads book club. You can join the conversations there as well and talk about the most recent book that we're reviewing for the month. And again, thank you, Holly, for administering that for us. Anything else we need to do before we close out this program?
Just a quick throw out to Genesis, who won our impromptu Doctor Who alphabet contest over on Facebook and is the winner of the E-Space Trilogy, because it was an alphabet contest. Wasn't that clever? And so a reminder to all of you that if you are listening to us, that you should also participate in social media, because it might be a contest for Patreon members. It might be a Facebook thing. It might be on Twitter. We never know what we're going to do next. But yes, we do things. So jump in there and be interactive.
Cool. Anything else we need to touch on? If not, until next time, I'm Glenn.
I'm Sean.
I'm Keith.
Cheers.
Good night, everybody.
Be seeing you. Thanks for listening.
You have been listening to Traveling the Vortex. Doctor Who and all of its associated programs are owned and trademarked by the BBC. No infringement is intended or implied.